All right, so I want to welcome everybody to the meeting. Thank you for signing up for Promote Your Business. I'm Debbie Miller, the Executive Director of the Brookline Chamber of Commerce, and thanks to Clara Kaufman, who's also an integral part of the Brookline Chamber of Commerce. We're all here, and everybody had their links, so this is great. We're especially grateful for Big Brookline Interactive Group for being here, for Kathy Bisbee and Tice and Corbin Rydell. They each bring their expertise and will help us, will enable us to then promote our businesses in a way that we might not have thought of before. I'm going to ask you all to please mute yourselves just because we don't want any background noise to distract us when someone's talking. You are being recorded. This is a recorded event. We do have the chat set up, so if you want to chat something while somebody's talking, feel free to, or put something in the Q&A, because there will be a time for questions and answers at the end. And I think I'll turn it over to Kathy from here.
Hi, welcome everybody. Anne's gonna go ahead and share her screen in just a minute here, but I just want to say hi and thank you all for spending your Friday afternoon with us, and thank you to the Chamber for having our team from Big prepare this webinar for you. It's been a very busy time. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the adaptive challenges we've been facing as an organization as part of my introduction here. But I'm really excited to get a little bit of time away from all of the government meetings we've been covering and community events and spend some time with you. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about Big here for just a minute. So I know a lot of you are probably really familiar with our work and what we do, but we're traditionally known as Public and Government Access Television, but this is our mission statement. We call ourselves an Integrated Media Arts and Technology Education Center, and we're a community media hub for Brookline and also the greater Boston area. We facilitate diverse community dialogue and incubate hyper-local media through storytelling, journalism, and media programs. And go to the next slide, Anne. With me today, I have Anne Tice, our Director of Programs, coming in from Denver, Colorado, and Corbin Rydell, our Assistant Director, who is coming from Framingham. And I myself, I'm the Executive Director of Big, and I'm out here in Western Massachusetts, where my husband and I live in Holyoke. So we are multi-location team at this point. So I'm just going to talk about the expected takeaways for today, and I'll let you know too, just a really small bit about my background. I, for 13 years, worked in business. I worked in a small business in Santa Cruz, California, an internet service provider, a mom and pop. And I became their marketing director because no one wanted to talk to the media. So I became the marketing director, and then went into Silicon Valley to work for tech companies doing marketing, and did national campaigns for marketing and community engagement as well. And before that, I worked for 13 years in community organizing. So I organized political campaigns. So a lot of marketing, a lot of community engagement, and now for the last 12 years have been in community media. So I only say that just to let you know that for my portion, I'll be talking a little bit about sort of the intersection of storytelling and marketing communications. So some expected takeaways today that we hope you'll get out of it are storytelling techniques, some examples of really great stories that are really powerful, and when you may cry, as I do, when you see some of these really compelling, emotive stories. How to discover your audience, thinking about your audience in different ways, but also thinking about during COVID-19, how there might be new audiences that you could reach with storytelling for your products and services. How do you harvest stories? How do you workshop your stories? How do you message, create scripts, develop a pre-production plan, and then how to shoot, edit, and distribute your stories, your video stories. So, and then lastly, really how to use Big's resources. We are here to help facilitate your access to media for all members of the Brookline community and beyond, and we hope we can help you. We know that this session is only an hour, really an hour, with your questions being the last half hour. So as Anne and Corbin and I were putting this together, we realized that we could probably make a 4-week series out of this. So know that we're trying to give you just the highlights so you can get started, and we will be available to answer questions, and we do have classes we'll let you know about as well. So Ian, if we can go ahead to the next slide. So I like to think of leadership during major moments of change as adaptive, and that's certainly been the case, I think, for all of us with COVID-19. Normally big covers about 5 hours, so usually 2, maybe 3 meetings every week. This week we had 15 live government and community meetings that we covered, which is a lot for our small team of 4. But it's been very exciting. You can see some of the examples of the meetings and the coverage that we've had, everything from craft alongs at the library and storytelling to Shabbat services and Mass, and the health advisory and school committee, and even State Representative Tommy Vitolo teaching us how to make Italian gravy, AKA marinara sauce this week. So it's been just wonderful to be able to serve the community in these ways. So we've also been doing a lot of training and development of documents. So we have a COVID-19 page at the bottom there that you can go to and see some of those ways that we might be able to help support you in doing things online, but also ways that you can make slides for your business and post them on the cable channel. So I just want to encourage you to go to that page and look at the business link that enables you to kind of see our guidelines. You're able to make your own slide that we will post on the cable channels. We normally don't do that because we are a non-commercial community cable channel, but we are encouraging businesses who are open to tell people how they can access you. We are live. Oh, wait, go back in. We are live on cable at RCN channels 3, 5, and 613, and on Comcast at 3 and 23. And you can find all of our live broadcasts at brooklineinteractive.org/live. We also are going to be covering mini election forums, and because a lot of us are going to be voting by mail, I think the majority of people, we want to make sure that folks are getting that information out in the community. Anne's going to tell us a little bit about some upcoming classes, including my class that I'll be teaching starting next Thursday on digital storytelling. So if you'd like to go more deeply into the digital storytelling and really do some hands-on writing exercises and create your own short story with us video, please join us. And we want your stories. We have a community Dropbox where you can upload any stories that you have created and share them with our entire 19,000 subscribers on cable here in Brookline, which is very high cable penetration for cable television at the local level. So please consider sharing whatever stories you create with our community. Go ahead, Anne, to the next slide. So Anne actually found this really great quote, and drama is anticipation mingled with uncertainty. So, you know, most of us don't really want to be told what's going to happen in a story. We like to anticipate what might happen to the characters. We're curious. We like to puzzle things together. It's really quite human, in fact, to try to put things together, to figure things out. And so when you're thinking about storytelling, we want to think about how we might mix anticipation with uncertainty. I'll talk a little bit about episodic storytelling later, but I always get a kick out of a friend of mine who she says, well, when I go on dates, I always want to tell every story of my life. And I said, well, you have to think of it as episodes. You know, don't tell everybody everything right away. So leave some room for the imagination. We can go back, Anne. Thanks. Some room for the imagination and some room for people to think about what might happen next, because we definitely are sort of wired that way as human beings. So during this presentation, I want you to really think about these questions. So this is really storytelling for marketing communications. What is the problem that your business or your product or your service solves for me? Why should I care? These are questions that your communications and your story are going to answer in some way. Who are you as a business, as a person, as a family, as a person in the community? What are the roles you play? Why does that matter? What are the things that set you apart from others? What sets your product and services apart from others? Or what is your connection? What is something that others can relate to about you? Where can I find you? You'd be surprised how many people leave out this very critical information. And yes, it sounds very simple and obvious, but I have seen so many ads and so many stories and so many videos online that have no information about how to contact the business whatsoever. So when I say you want to appeal to people's curiosity, don't make it that hard for them to find you. And then how do I take action? What's the call to action to them? Is it that you want them to go to a website? Is it that you want them to come into your store? Is it that it's branding, or you want to communicate a safe way to purchase? And right now, and I'm going to talk more about that, that's really important to everyone. So go ahead to the next slide, Ann. Thank you. So, some of you may be familiar with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So if you look at this graphic, the first act is really the introduction to the protagonist. So as you're thinking about storytelling, who is the protagonist? It could be a customer, it could be you, it could be your dog, it could be your cat. In Ann's case, she did a great story about her dog, from her dog's perspective. Who is the protagonist? Who's the main character that you're going to talk about in this story? What's the call to action for them? And in a lot of cases in marketing, you're thinking about what's the problem we're going to solve for them, right? And then they cross the threshold, if you will. And these are kind of the big classic stories. Not all stories are going to break down into every single part of this, but there's a mentor, Yoda, for example, in Star Wars, right, is the mentor. And then there's a first challenge, Luke trying to raise the ship out of the swamp, right, is the first challenge. There's temptation. I'm not sure what the temptation was in Star Wars, but then there's the dark moment, the final conflict, some big crescendo in the third act. And then the resolution, and the hero returns home. And what's really cool about the hero's journey is that Joseph Campbell did all this research to almost every culture around the planet has some version of this same hero's journey manifest in the story. So when we tell stories that way, other humans can relate to it. It's absolutely universal. So so think about, how will this story tell some aspect of the hero's journey? I wanted to throw out a couple statistics that actually Ann gave me these. I thought they were really interesting. Visuals. One of the reasons I used this particular graphic is that it was so colorful, but also very clear. And I knew it could kind of pull you in with really clear, simple words and great graphics that would show you what each of those sections meant. Visuals are so important. Visuals and audio. We process visuals in our brain 60 times faster than text. So you're sitting here, you're looking at the graphics, you're looking at us, and you're probably processing what we look like and the graphics that are on the screen faster than you are the words that I'm saying, which is also good why it's good to sometimes repeat things, because people miss things. But visually, they don't. So telling those stories through visuals that are emotive visuals are really important, that connect the dots for people as well. 90% of information transmitted to the brain is visual. And people can recall about 65% of that visual content almost 3 days later, compared to 10% that they see written. That's why a lot of us take really a lot of notes in meetings or when we're in school, because that visual and also kinetic aspect is really important to our process of learning and remembering things. I will say on that note, while music and visuals and images are really important and convey that emotion and that visual is really memorable, there's a lot of, we won't have time to go into this, but there's a lot of great data out there about how different learners access information. For those of you that are interested in that, there's kinetic learners, there's visual learners, there's auditory learners, there's empathetic learners, and there's digital learners as well. And so thinking about how people might learn information is really important to those of us that are teaching, but also as marketing communication folks who are trying to let someone know about something. The words that we choose to use, they might be the words that we and our learning style is most comfortable with. And so when we're thinking about language, we want to use words that not just our learning style is comfortable with, but also other people's learning style. Most of us, though, are visual learners, and that's why these statistics about how people respond to visuals are really important, because we're seeing things and we're feeling things through the visuals. Relatable characters. One of the most important things is a character that the most number of people can relate to, with emotion generated immediately. And you'll see in this story that we're going to look at how emotion just hooks you into that story. Show, don't tell. Very hard to do. Easy to tell people everything. Again, episodic, and give them one main point, maybe two, in a short video. Descriptive but concise, and then our sensory cortex in our brain lights up because of stories. This is old. Since our ancestors were sitting around a campfire telling stories to each other, we know stories. We know the hero's journey, and we know to anticipate a story. So we can tap into that as marketers and be able to use that. Go ahead to the next slide, Ian. But the most common story, and happy early Mother's Day, is about people's mothers. So as marketers, you're in luck, because that resonates with everyone. Now, even if you don't have time to tell a Mother's Day story, if you're trying to put something together before Mother's Day and you don't have time, that's okay, because stories about mothers and our relationship to our mothers are universal year-long. So you can always use your leverage a story about your mom, about a customer's mom, about their relationship to their mom, their relationship to their own kids. This graphic really shows you all of these different themes around our moms and our relationships with them that are totally universal to humans across the planet. So you can tap into that and think about, how could I tell a story? Maybe it's something happens with a product around Mother's Day and you're able to capture it now and then use it all year round for different purposes. And this is this graphic thanks to the Story Center in California, which is one of my mentors. Go ahead, Ian, to the next one. Okay, so this is the video that every time I watch it, no matter how many times I watch it, it makes me cry. So I will probably closely looking for the tears here. It's so compelling. It's from 2013, I believe, but it's a Google search ad. And when you watch it, so we're going to watch it together. I want you to really think about these things and make some notes to yourself. How does this story help us make sense of things? That's what stories do, right? They help us put together things that maybe we didn't even think about, whether it be to lead us to a conclusion that we need a certain product, or that we're actually more afraid than we thought we were, or we're happier with in relation to a certain product or a service. Who is the hero? Who are the heroes? How is this story and their story relatable to our personal stories? How do we connect into that story? What are the emotional hook? What is the emotional hook in this story? How does it build suspense? Is it doing it through visuals, through audio, through music, through the language? Who's the audience? Who's the business? And what are they selling? And I think this is an important one in this ad, in this story, because it's not just the literal thing that they're selling, it's also the metaphor. And there are some interesting things about that we'll talk about. Where is the contrast in this story? One of the things that we've seen in storytelling is that when you can contrast things, people pay attention. So if you use language like, it used to be like this, but now it's like this, or this is how it was before, this is how it is after, it resonates with people. There's research that backs that up. And it helps our brains make sense of something, right? If we can see something in contrast to something else. So in this story, I'm curious what you think the contrast might be. And then what is the bottom line problem being solved for the customer? And again, I just want to keep coming back to that, because ultimately in communications, we're always telling the story of, this is how my product, my business, my story, my experience. This is how it relates to you, and this is the problem that it's solving for you. So let's go ahead and watch this. Have your Kleenex, you know, close at hand.
ये मैं, ये यूसुफ, लंगोटिया यार सी मेरा। लाहौर में हमारे घर के सामने एक बड़ा बाग था। उस बाग का गेट बाबा आदम के जमाने। रोज शाम को हमने वहाँ पतंगे उड़ानी और उसके बाद जाके यूसुफ के दुकान से झझरिया चुरा के खानी।
झझरिया?
और मेरा साहब नमस्ते।
नमस्ते, मेरी पोती मुंबई वाली।
और बेटे क्या हाल चाल है? की तंग गली फिर से कूद फांदे, छोटी छोटी मीठी चोरी गांठ लेके बांधे।
हेलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
फाजिल स्वीट्स?
हाँ जी। दादाजान, दिल्ली से किसी की कॉल है।
हेलो,
यूसुफ अंकल?
कौन?
जी मैं सुमन बोल रही हूँ दिल्ली से, आपके बचपन के दोस्त बलदेव जी की पोती। याद है बचपन में आप दोनों झझरिया चुरा के खाते थे?
बचपन की तंग गली फिर से कूद फांदे, छोटी छोटी मीठी चोरी गांठ लेके बांधे। एक पतंग सा उड़ता था परिंदों की तरह, परिंदों की तरह, परिंदों की तरह। एक दौर था मन मन मोर था, एक दौर था मन मन मोर था।
पार्टीशन के वक्त हम रातों रात हिंदुस्तान आ गए।
दादू?
यूसुफ दी बड़ी याद आती है।
कागजों की कश्तियों में डूबा रहता था, झांकती खिड़कियों में उलझा रहता था। वो भी क्या दौर था, मन पे न जोर था। एक दौर था मन मन मोर था, एक दौर था मन मन मोर था।
भैया थोड़ा जल्दी।
हाँ जी, कौन? हैप्पी बर्थडे यारा। यूसुफ, यूसुफ, वो यूसुफ, मेरे बल्लू, यूसुफ यार।
Okay. Let's go ahead and pause that. Anybody cry? Raise your hand. For fifth time. What a beautiful story, isn't it? Now, you don't have to have the $1 million ad budget to create those kinds of graphics and that kind of a beautiful emotional story. So when you're thinking about this, there's a number of heroes in this story, right? There's a hero's journey. There really is a hero's journey. There's a return. There's a conflict, and then there's a return. Apologize to me for making everyone cry. It's just had to be shared. Their stories so relatable, both the younger people and the older people. There's, the suspense of the audio. And now I noticed something this time around, that the audio kind of got light when she did the Fazil suites and started to get into the process of moving towards the conclusion of the story. It built some energy, which I thought was really beautiful. The audience, there's a lot of people who are going to use a search engine, right? But I thought what I really loved about this story is it kind of connected the old world with the new world on a literal and a metaphoric level, right? So we have this sort of, story about people. The story was not about the technology, really. It was about the people, right? It was about the emotional relationship of the people and the relationship of these grandkids to their grandfather and the two grandfathers together. It's something we can relate to. We've all lost a childhood friend and wanted to reconnect. It's nostalgic. And it's also, I don't know if you noticed, it's the separation of these two countries of Pakistan and India was also sort of this metaphor for loss and reconnection too, right? So old world, new world, divide, coming back together. So that they were some of the conflicts in the hero story. So, and then of course the problem being solved for the customer is obvious, which is, you can find information and have access to these old parts of who you are and the parts of your life. So let's go ahead to the next slide, Anne. Thank you. Oh, we skipped one back. So, as you're thinking about your stories, who is your audience? What do they care about? What do they value? What's important to them? What are their goals? What are they struggling with right now? What's the problem that you can solve for them? And what stories might best resonate with them during COVID-19 and at other times? Next slide. So, one of the best ways to build stories for your audience is to leverage tactics being used by the big brands, because they've done millions of dollars of market research. I know, because I sat in rooms in the technology sector for big corporations. They do market research, they do focus groups. I sat behind the glass walls and did focus groups with people. So use some of their market research to your advantage, and then focus it on a hyper-local message. So it's good to watch some of these stories that we're seeing out there, especially right now, because it's a totally unprecedented time, obviously, and people are trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. So the most important thing that you can do to start your storytelling process and to think about building stories with your audience is to listen, research, and adapt stories to your audience by doing things like sub-segmenting. So thinking about, okay, I'm trying to reach seniors. Well, what kind of seniors? What are not just the demographics, but what are the psychographics? Well, I want seniors who go on Facebook to talk to their grandkids. So that starts to give you some parameters for what kinds of stories you might want to tell, because you're segmenting and sub-segmenting those target audiences. Building surveys. So like we asked you guys, what kinds of things do you want to learn from this, so that we could better understand how we might communicate best to you to make sure that we're covering the things that you want to hear. Again, what's in it for you? How is it providing value to the customer? Building personas. Some of you may have heard of this. We used to call it segmenting. Now they call it personas. I've actually drafted up, this is this person, fictional or otherwise, that uses our product, and described why they value us, what the value proposition is for them, what the story was about how they started using our product or service. And by building personas, it helps you to start thinking about who your target audience is. Walking through your customer journey. So thinking about with your staff or with your business partners, or even with a customer, what their experience is like when they first heard about you, when they came in for the first time, and then what their process is for using services or different services. This all helps to give you information to sort of arm you with the best strategies for storytelling. Two things that are more tactical, which is newsletter signups. I'm going to so many sites right now that don't have signups. And what I'm wanting as a customer, and I imagine that I'm a pretty good data point with this, I want to know when those businesses that I have gone to in the past are open, how they're providing safe services, how I can access them safely, what are the methods I can use for accessing them and receiving their products. And I'm looking for specialty items. I'm looking for kits. I'm looking for gifts. I'm looking for things that are easy for me to get and safely to get online. So having a newsletter sign up and then sending weekly and daily emails out as much as you can with useful information for your customers, and not just about your business, but maybe even put links in there to other things that are helpful to them at this time. You know, workouts, mental health, ideas for kids, art projects, things that will also provide value. And I'm going to skip through that last section. I do want to show you this course ad really quick. Anne, can we show this? So they said it's really hard to articulate how it sucks for people right now, but it sucks for all of us in different ways. And I thought they were really onto it with this marketing campaign. It's just a 48 seconds.
Fighting a revolutionary war can be sucky. But do you know how George Washington kept his troops motivated? He made sure his men had beer. How about the Great Depression? It turns out that was pretty sucky too. But you know what they did? They called for an end to prohibition. Did it solve anything? Of course not. But it did help them press on. Which brings us to today. Suckiness of historical proportions. Now, we know this won't fix it, but how about some beer? Go to @CoorsLight on Twitter and tell us who could use a six-pack and we'll buy them one. Because if history's taught us anything, it's that sometimes we could all just use a beer.
Great ad, isn't it? Just came out 3 days ago, by the way, and I just happened to catch it on Twitter. And I thought, oh, that's great. So that really leads me to the next slide, Anne, which is how do we use leverage things that are going on for all of us in a universal way to tell stories. So 2 points really quick on this slide. I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit because I'm running behind. This is Kentucky Fried Chicken. This is what they tweeted out a couple of days ago. Really clear. They're telling a story here, even though it doesn't look like a video. It's not a, it's not like the Coors Light ad, but they're telling a story, which is the value proposition that they're giving to customers is you can feel safe buying products from us, and specifically here are the steps for how you get food safely. But I found it pretty ironic. I don't know if you can see there on the screen what it says, but a customer said, despite all of this, the language that they're using is very, very, we're making the containers really safe. The customer tweeted, one of your containers of chicken came without the lid on top of it from the delivery person. So one, make sure you're checking your Twitter feeds and responding to things because you want to make sure you're reassuring that value proposition, and you want to see if the supply chain's having any problems. You can leverage trends and humor. We don't have time to show it, but if you've seen the Dollar Shave Club ad, it's a minute or two long. It's really funny. It's, I think they spent $4,500 on that campaign, and within 2 months, they had 20,000 new customers immediately, I think a month. So it's just funny. It's really funny. Like the Coors Light ad is also funny and relatable. Share your own experience. Sometimes people don't like to do this, but when we see other people vulnerable, when we hear about your experience, both your successes and your struggles, we connect to you. It feels much more authentic to know that you've also struggled. We can relate to you as a character. You are a hero of your own business experience story. You really are. And think about a short story a day, and you can just write a note to yourself on your phone and just say, okay, this funny thing happened today, or I had this moment of awareness today, and then you can make it into a story for your newsletter. And let's go to the next slide, please. This is a picture of my Brazilian cheese bread that I made last week. And for story mining our stories, we want to think about things that are relevant right now. So watch for timely topics. Those are universal stories that we're all talking about in the water cooler, on Twitter, on social media, things about procrastinating, COVID baking, COVID cookbooks, binging, these idea of kits that are being sold, that's been rising to the top this week. Workouts at home, kids at home, couples therapy, Tiger King, of course. Yesterday I saw Oprah. There was a story about Oprah having trouble putting her duvet covers on correctly, which is crazy that rose to the top page of CNN, but it did. And the UFO story yesterday broke, people going to the bathroom while they're on a Zoom call, pet adoption, Zoom fatigue, any of those things that you can find a funny way to mention are going to sort of hit a nerve universally with people. And that's always true. It's not just true during COVID. It's always true. Look for ways that a story is universal and tell a story that you could insert your product or your own story into. Also track your staff stories from customer interactions. So have some sort of way that you're actually documenting those stories, whether it's a Google Doc, and ask your customers on your website for those testimonials. You can even have them send photographs that you could then use in these stories that you're going to be taught how to create here in just a minute from Ann and Corbin. And last of all, you know, the beginning of your business story is an amazing story. It always is. Everyone thinks they don't have a story, but I guarantee you do. You have an amazing story that other people can relate to. One of the best ways to start that writing process is to do a 7-minute brainstorm, focused. Even if you feel that you're not creative that moment, write a web of words. So little circles of words all over a page, and just get a word bank going of words that describe your experience as a business person, your value proposition to your customer, things that are happening right now that are relevant and timely. Start with that, and then you can build your script for your story and start the process of creating your story. And with that segue, I'm going to hand it over to Ann, who can tell us, how do you actually start the process of story and writing a script?
All right, thanks, Kathy. So Kathy gave us so much great information. Oops, sorry about that. I just shared with everyone in the chat a link, a bit.ly link to a worksheet that I created. So I'm just gonna take a few minutes here in between Kathy, who gave you so much great information about developing a story and pulling you in, and Corbin, who's going to give you practical experience of how to do some of these things and creating videos with some things that you might have at home. I just want to take a minute to ground you in like some how to kind of get in between the story development piece and the actual production piece. So when you have a chance, you can download that worksheet, and it's going to help you walk through the story development process. So some of the things that Kathy mentioned, thinking about who you are as a business, what do you have to add, what's your mission, how are you helping people, what are you providing people, and then who's your customer, the things that Kathy mentioned, what are their demographics, what are their psychographics, what are the things that they need solved, and then thinking about how can you solve those things. So when Kathy mentioned the hero's journey, one of the biggest thing in the hero's journey is the conflict. How does the hero, what is the conflict? How does the hero get to that conflict, and how do they overcome it? That's the whole story arc. So this worksheet kind of helps you to walk through some of those pieces. So let me just actually pull this so you can just see what it looks like here. It's just a Google Doc. Okay. And so we just have some of the business information, mission, customer, and then you get down into the story. So you think about the plot. What is a story that exemplifies what your business does for its customer? Who is the character? Who are those people that could actually tell that story? Who is the hero in your story? And then what is that conflict, and how is it overcome? Those are the important parts of the story. So once you're gonna get that story figured out, then you can move into the pre-production process. And that's thinking about, what is that video gonna look like? How are you gonna shoot it? Is it gonna be a documentary? Is it gonna be like a short little narrative? Is it an animation? Is it a how-to video? Maybe you just, like the Kentucky Fried Chicken ad, maybe you're just trying to demonstrate how things are done in order to entice people to come to your restaurant versus another restaurant that might not be practicing safe hygiene. So what images can be used, headshots, what locations, what kind of demonstrations could you do, and what pictures. So maybe you're just doing social media and you just want to do a simple picture like Kathy did of her cheese bread to just entice people to want to come in and taste that tasty bread. What kind of audio can you use? Maybe you're just going to use the audio from an interview or the story that someone's telling. Maybe you have a series of images to tell the story and you want to do a voiceover, or maybe it's music. Maybe you're just going to use music and images together to pull people into a story. And then ultimately, very important, as Kathy mentioned, don't forget this piece. What kind of graphics do you need and what kind of information do you need to share on those graphics? Do you have specials? Do you have contact information, websites, phone numbers, hours? What are the kinds of things that you need to share with people? And then on the last page here, there's just, again, just sort of like a list of information of each one of these different phases. So the story development, there's a worksheet here that you can use. It's a story arc, so it can kind of help you walk through that hero's journey. There's a link here to a sample script, so you can see what a script looks like if you want to actually develop a script, if you're going to do some sort of narrative piece. And then also a storyboard. So plotting out, what do you want things to look like? And Corbin's going to walk through how to use a camera and get those kinds of shots, but that's going to help you think through what kind of shots you want to use. So that's and then the pre-production process is planning all of those things. The production process is then actually shooting, gathering all those things, putting it together in a physical way. And then the editing is actually making those decisions of like what actual clips you're going to use, what are all the elements you're going to use, and actually doing the assembling of all of those things. So those are the different steps. And let me see here. All right, we'll go back here. So once you get past this pre-production part, when you get through the story, this is sort of the overall process that's left. So again, just the story part, who are you, who's your customer, what's the story, planning, scripting, going into shooting, editing and graphics, and then of course, ultimately getting it out there. It's really important that you get it out there, you share it with your social media channels, you can share it with us, obviously, other kinds of nonprofit and local different media outlets that are out there. So it's really important to make sure that you do that last part, because all of your efforts will be wasted if you don't figure out a way to also get it out there as much as possible. And lastly, I just want to mention, I mean, I know we're going through a lot of information and it might feel very quick, but we are going to be doing several classes this month that might help you understand things a little bit more in detail. So again, Kathy's having her class. That'll be on May 7th, and that's a 4-week class, an hour and a half at each session. I'm doing video conferencing tools for artists, nonprofits, educators, really anybody to use Zoom to tell some of these stories. And then Corbin will be, what he's going through next, he's going to be going through in a much greater detail for 2 full hours shooting and editing. So just so you know, those are upcoming. And then the 13th and the 20th are donation-based classes, so we're not requesting any specific fee, but Kathy's class does have a $50 fee. So just want to share that with you. And with that, I will hand it off to Corbin, who is going to actually walk you through the production process and using some of the equipment that you would need to actually film these things.
All right. Hello, everybody. So essentially, I've set this class, and please give me a minute to acclimate myself. I'm used to actually teaching in person and going in hands-on approach. So teaching on the web-based format is kind of new to me. But yeah, so essentially what I'm trying to do is formulate this class to help anybody who even just has, their smartphone create videos for their businesses, for their own personal use, outside of just, blogging or phone chats with family and friends. So even though it says like phone, tablet, or laptop, if you have a DSLR like I do or somebody else does, you can also use that with these techniques as well. So go ahead, next slide. All right, so creating videos on your phone or tablet is not exclusive to me as to vloggers or CAD video enthusiasts, as I've mentioned before. As much as those are very important videos, those CAD videos especially, you don't have to stay limited just to those two different things. You can actually shoot like an entire movie on a cell phone. I think it was not Peter Bogdanovich, but it was another director who actually did an entire movie based on his iPhone. And it actually premiered in theaters. So there's the capability that you have in your hands or in your pocket. As most everybody has almost a smartphone or tablet, you can actually do these things on a relatively smaller budget. And with all the social networking platforms out there, it is easier than ever to get your message across to the people who you are looking to reach. And also it's easy and fun to do. So the basics of what you'll need are a smartphone with video capability or a tablet, or a DSLR as I showed earlier, enough storage for at least a 30-minute shoot, which is typically about 4 gigs depending on the quality of video. You might need a little bit more if you're shooting in 4K, but if you're just shooting in regular 1080, about 4 gigs is relatively enough for a 30-minute piece. And then you'll need some sort of editing software, which I recommend editing on a computer as opposed to trying to edit on your phone, just because it's a lot easier and it's a little bit more precise. Also optional things you might need, like an external microphone, either handheld, shotgun, or a lavalier microphone, which clips onto your clothing, a portable lighting kit, or you can also just use the sunlight if you have sun outside. But if you need a portable lighting kit, that's also optimal as well. And also a selfie stick or a cell phone tripod mount, because holding your phone like this can get a little jarring unless you have really steady hands. Okay. So what we're going to be going into now is a little bit of composition, how to set up your framing properly, how to set up if you're going to do an interview, how to set those up properly, basically just how to make a much more pleasing image. Okay, so some of the first rules, or I shouldn't say rules, they're more like guidelines. Some of the first couple of guidelines are how to frame up your subject, right? With the first one saying headroom, essentially what you're doing is you're trying to frame up your subject so that way you're not cutting off them at the forehead, right? Or maybe you're showing them from a different perspective that may not be that appealing. You want to give them a little bit of space at the top of their heads to kind of just move around in, right? If you do something like this, that's a little too much headroom, right? Of course, I can't see myself, so I don't know if I have proper framing or not. But anyway, okay, here we go. So you can see in the middle, that's just enough framing to make it pleasing, right? You're not cutting them off. You're not showing, the stratosphere. You're just about right. Another thing you want to keep in mind of is look room, right? And look room essentially is looking at the frame of your picture. Where is the person's nose pointing towards, right? If they're pointing towards the edge of the screen, that's too close. You're keeping them, you're closing them off to the rest of the scenario around them. You're showing what's behind them instead of what's in front of them. It's not as pleasing, it's confusing, and some people look at this and kind of see it as being frustrating. This also works for Zoom calls, right? So if somebody is sitting there on one side or the other of the screen, they're talking to the wall, it's not going to go over that well. So, just something to keep in mind. Give them enough room to actually look into. All right. This one's a little bit more for those who actually have or need action shots. If you have somebody who's moving from one side of the screen to the other, you want to give your subject lead room. And much like look room, lead room is just room for people to move into. You'll see that a lot in sports. If somebody is running from third to home after the batter, knocks it out of the park, you don't want to line up the runner at one side of the screen, because then what if they get tagged out, right? You're missing the action. So you want to give your subject room to actually move into, to present a less more pleasing aura to your audience, right? Less frustration, and you actually let the audience absorb what's happening in front of your character. Okay. Also, another rule is the rule of thirds. This one is a little bit more strict than the rest, but you know, it's also fairly flexible. Essentially what you're trying to do is imagine your screen with a grid dividing it into 3, right? The rule of thirds. And along that grid, as you can see in these pictures, there is certain points of interest that you want to give to your audience, right? Like the dog. The dog is the point of interest at that cross section, right? His face is looking out towards the horizon. You got enough space around him to let the audience absorb the information for themselves rather than telling them exactly what you want them to focus on. And it just presents a little bit more of a balanced picture. You have certain points of interest that you are drawing your audience's eyes to. Next, we'll go into some camera movements. The first one is the pan and tilt. And these are probably the most general camera moves that anybody has ever watched TV or film will recognize, right? The pan is when your camera is slowly moving left or right while your camera is centered, right? You're not actually physically moving the camera, you're just turning it, following the action as things happen. As well as the tilt, you are moving from the bottom of your screen to the top of the screen or vice versa, right? Showing a general movement of interest to your audience. A lot of times this happens if you're revealing, let's say you have a villain on screen, but your hero's looking down like they just got, you know, hit in the back of the head or something. They're starting to like slowly pan up from the villain's feet to reveal who just did, you know, who hit them in the back of the head. That's what you want to do for tilting. It's a general basic move as well as pan, just to kind of give movement to your scene. And of course, the zoom. Anybody who's watched TV will definitely see a zoom at some point or the other. It's a way to help focus your visuals to your audience. It's also a way to kind of present drama. So again, kind of like we have here, this guy's, you know, let's say a spy mystery. He's the one who's following around the hero, and the hero does now realize that he's being tailed. So let's dramatically zoom in to the guy outside smoking his pipe. So. Okay. All those tie into framing, right? So the rule of thirds, zoom, pan, tilt, look room, lead room, headroom, they all tie into framing. Framing is the technique of drawing attention to the subject of your image by blocking other parts of the image with something in the scene, right? If you're filming an important part of creating a story-telling sequence, you'll want a variety in different framing to give perspectives to the viewer. And how you choose those frames strongly influences how your viewer is going to interpret the images. You could give a dramatic effect to something that's a little bit more comical or vice versa, and maybe you don't want to do that. So next frame. So these are kind of a few basic techniques. We're not going to go into every single one of them, but these slides will be available to you. And you can take a look at these different framing techniques. All these are basically used to help tell different parts of a story. The first 4 in particular are used in pretty much every interview segment that you watch on TV. Other things that, like the extreme close-up or the cutaway, are used to help tell the story in more detail. The extreme close-up shows the finite details in the frame that maybe helps to generate tension in your story. And the cutaway is showing the audience what is not normally there in the scene. So let's say you have 2 people talking, one of them starts looking at their watch, right? You normally don't see that unless you cut away to the watch itself. Or let's say, you know, they're looking off screen like this one, and they see the kids in the field. Normally you don't see that until the audience or the cameraman or editor cuts away to that image itself. Next slide. The cut in is very similar to the cutaway, except you're getting more detail. Like I said, with the watch, that's more of a cut in than maybe a cutaway, but they're used interchangeably. The 2-shot is used for kind of like more interview, or let's say you have one person talking to 2 people. Pretty straightforward there. As well as the other shots there. The one that is the point of view. Not as widely used unless you're doing something that you want the tension of, let's say you have your character is disoriented and you want to show from their perspective. So you show like a wobbly camera angle as they're walking down the street. They just came out of a bar fight or something like that. Don't know why I'm using violence so much, but you know, a bar fight. They're still disoriented, and you'll show the point of view to give the audience that tension. Other framing techniques that also disorient and show tension. The high angle shows weakness or a sense of being overwhelmed. The low angle shows power or dominance, right? So if you're shooting from high up and if you're shooting from the high angle, you're showing your characters in a moment of weakness because they look smaller, right? Whereas the low angle, you're showing the people looking much bigger, much more domineering, which is why it shows power dominance. The Dutch tilt angle represents disorientation or confusion, right? We normally don't see the world in a canted angle, but the more you show it, the more you're going to show disorientation. Maybe you're presenting drunkenness or confusion, then you'd want to use that angle. All right. Let's talk about good versus bad framing. And this is some mistakes that everybody makes from time to time, especially if you're in a Zoom call or you're using your phone. You may not realize you're doing it. You don't want to show yourself from your nose. You basically don't want to have people looking up your nose if you're doing something with your phone. It's not very pleasant. It's also not a very good angle. Same thing would be if you are showing somebody like this, right? My head's at the bottom of the screen. You're not seeing the whole picture except what's above me, really. Something you just want to kind of avoid, as well as showing somebody from this point down, right? You're not seeing their eyes. A lot of our interaction with people is through the eyes. So you want to show that as much as possible instead of, you know, from the nose down. So go ahead, next slide. So if your image looks more like this, next slide. Good job, you got on the right track, right? You gotta give yourself props. If you look like that, you're doing good. Okay, so if you're shooting with a cell phone, sometimes, especially if you just get it, your phone will not switch from the vertical camera view or the portrait mode to the landscape mode automatically. So to help your productions, you want to definitely shoot in the landscape mode as opposed to the portrait mode. Portrait mode is mostly just for video conferencing with family and friends. Landscape mode is for professional use. To help signify that, or to help to fix that problem, go to the next slide. If you have an iPhone, you'll see a lock icon. If you drag down, if you swipe down or swipe up on your iPhone, you'll see a lock icon with that little swoosh around it. If it's white, it's locked. If you click on it, it'll turn black, which means then it's unlocked. And at that point, you can turn your phone and it will justify to that position. With Android, it's a little bit more, there's more options as far as what that button means. You can find a button that's labeled auto rotate or one that says portrait on it. I know mine, I think, goes between the two. So if you see either one of those, if it's grayed out like it is currently in this picture, it's now locked. So you'd have to press the button to make it auto rotate. So when you turn your phone, it'll go to the right justification. Okay. This is optional equipment that will help enlighten or help boost your production value. They are optional, but they do help quite a bit. What you can see here is a selfie stick with a mount for not only an LED light, but also an external shotgun mic. And the other cool thing about this option is that it comes with different accessories, like a little sound muff to help with the wind outside. They'll cut down on the blowing noise on the microphone that will help distort your audio. If you just Google on either Google or Amazon looking for smartphone video gear, you'll come up with a whole bunch of different options. Just make sure that the option that you pick works for your smartphone itself. So we got a question from Kathy. What's the best way to zoom with a smartphone? If you go into your camera settings, look, I've got my camera here. For Android, if you just actually click in with your fingers, you can see kind of how it's zooming in and zooming out. You can also see right here, there's actually a grid that you can use your finger to zoom in or out on as well. It's not necessarily the most ideal way, but if you get a selfie stick like this one here, this actually has a built-in zoom function that will control that on your phone. Other options for iPhones have similar buttons or gears, so they will actually transmit that information to your phone to zoom in or out a little bit more smoothly. Otherwise, the other way to best zoom in or out is just physically doing it, right? Move closer or further away from your subject. That way you don't have to worry about the digital zoom. Okay, next slide. All right, let's talk about lighting. As I say here, the lighting is the great equalizer. Proper lighting can make you look professional and confident, or ghoulish and secretive. Which one do you want, right? And go to the next slide. I'll show you a couple examples of what I mean. So we can't all have beautiful, professional 3-point lighting at home. Lighting could be kind of expensive. Plus, you know, you may not have enough room to do it. But if you have it and you use it, more power to you. However, if you're also using just natural light, go to the next slide. There are a few tips to show you what I mean by either ghoulish or professional. The top one, where the person has their back to the window, is the wrong one. And we see this more often than not. We've had to correct it quite a few times in our Zoom calls. If you have a window, don't put it behind you, because you'll have great shadows like this one right here. It'll not be as professional as, say, putting either to the side or having it in front of you, right? The bottom window, bottom picture in our window here is with the window to the front of you. I know, I understand that might be a little hard sometimes when you're looking into the camera to actually, you know, focus, but it's better than looking like you're, you know, trying to hide from the police or something. Let's see. Got a question here. I find it hard to find good accessory options that plug into the iPhone. Any advice for adapters? What I could do, I'll look into that. I can actually give you my email afterwards, and what I can do is come up with a couple of good options for you. Especially if you give me the version iPhone that you have, I can find ones that work specifically for that one, because I know they change every year. Well, maybe every year to 2 years. So with that, technology changes as well. So what might work for the new iPhone may not work for your old one, or if your older one. I know you're not crazy. All right, next slide. All right, so with basics of lighting continuing, another thing you want to look out for is different color temperatures in your lighting environment. Every light source, light bulb, sunlight, they all have different color temperatures. And what that means is they put off different hues, right? So the sunlight and daylight put off a bluish hue, whereas like a halogen bulb in your home puts off more of an orangish red hue. If you have fluorescents, they put off anywhere between pink and green. And one good thing is, one thing to remember is try not to mix light sources too much, because then you get a sort of mishmash, sort of like a garbled look of picture quality, right? And if you go back to try and color correct that later, your computer's going to have a hard time to fix that too, because they're all over the place. Right. Again, this is an example of ghoulish ghoulish lighting, right? Essentially, you have just the light coming from your computer or your screen that is illuminating your face. To avoid that, make sure you have your background lit, right? As much as it is important to light yourself, it's also important to light your background and your surroundings. This will help to cut back on this image that you see here, help to cut back on the harsh lighting on your face and the dark lighting behind you. All right. Also, as important as picture is your sound. Having good audio is almost as important, if not more important than video. People will tend to forgive bad video if you have good audio, which is surprising, but it makes a lot of sense. Not only as a visual person, but we also have the auditory control that, or the auditory preferences that if, let's say, you have feedback or an echo from me, it would make you, turn it off right away. But you have, bad video with good audio, you may be, again, it may be something that somebody will forgive. Next slide, okay. For recording sakes, if you're doing a Zoom call, especially if you're doing a Zoom call, wear headphones. If you're recording a podcast on your computer, wear headphones. And the reason why I say this is because the speakers in your computer can be picked up by your microphone and cause an auditory loop, right? It'll cause distortion, it'll cause feedback, it'll cause an echo. It's just not going to make a good, good audio recording session all around. But if you use things like a handheld, or a handheld, excuse me, a headset microphone, or in my case, like this one, hopefully this is not going to screw my audio too bad. I actually have
Corbin, did we lose your audio? Speaking of audio.
Did you get my mask? What?
Corbin, I think we lost your audio.
All right, let's try it again.
Okay.
That works better?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
And I just want to give you a time check because we're getting a little bit low on time. So just want to let you know.
Okay.
And one thing I'll say just about audio, Corbin, you may say this, but as long as you have good audio, everything else can come after the fact. So, make sure your audio is really, really strong. And if somebody has audio in their background right now, could you please mute yourself if you're not talking? Thank you.
All right, so yeah, since we're kind of running short on time, I'll try to get through these as quickly as possible. Go ahead, next slide, please. All right, let's talk about setting location pretty quickly. Go to the next slide. It's always a good idea to remember to have clean space for people to look at, right? If you're especially, again, I keep referencing Zoom, but it's actually a good example. If you're doing a Zoom call and you have, a messy house, it may not look as professional as you may want. So having a good setting for your video is a really, really good thing to remember. So go to the next slide. So editing, we're really not going to go too far the depth of editing, but I'll give you just kind of a quick rundown, especially since this would take at least a couple sessions to go over. But I said in the beginning of the presentation, having an audio software on your computer is a lot easier than doing it on your phone. So go to the next slide. There are a few free or cheap options that you can use at home. Down below you see iMovie, which is a Mac-specific program. So if you have an Apple product, you probably already have iMovie on your computer. But for those who don't have Macs, or maybe you want something a little bit different, there's a couple options like eVideo, Lightworks, or Hit Film Express, which some of them do have a subscription fee for like a much more functionality, but it's relatively cheap. It's maybe about 10 or 15 bucks maybe a month. You can also get Premiere if you want to pay for it. I think it's about $25, $26 a month just by itself, but you don't have to get that if you don't want to. Next slide. So all editing software pretty much works the same. They work on several different principles. A sequence is where you assemble all your clips. You've got your tracks, which are basically layers of video and audio to help give a little bit more of a dynamic presentation of your video. You have your tool palettes, which allow you to make changes to your video and audio. You have a browser, which is where your clips are stored. You have a program window, which is where you're going to actually see your project as it's being played out. And you also have effects and transitions, which are basically filters and ways to help blend scenes together through transitions. One thing I will say about transitions, though, it's always important to use a transition that's appropriate for your subject matter. If you have a subject that's serious, you don't want to have like a star wipe. That's just going to throw people off. So, all right, next slide. These are just a couple examples of the interface that you might come across when you're actually choosing editing software. This one here is Adobe Premiere Pro, which, go back to the Adobe real quick. Which you can see is fairly cluttered, right? But that is all just dependent on how deep of a project you want to go into. The blue and purple indicators down there, those are your video and graphics. The green ones are your audio. So this is somebody who put a lot of thought into a project with music and effects, but your project may not look the same. All right, next slide. This is an example of the Wii video interface. As you can kind of see, it looks very similar to the Premiere interface. You have pictures down there to show your video and graphics, as well as a gray bar for your audio. And then you also have an area up here which shows you samples for graphics, and there's also tabs for music and effects and all that other fun stuff. But then you also have a preview or a program window over here to the side, which shows you what you've created. Okay, next slide.
Corbin, I'll just mention that during the digital storytelling class, we're going to be learning WeVideo as the tool for editing. So if you're looking for more help with that, that's something we will be going over. We also teach Premiere at Big as well.
All right. Cool. All right, so couple things, just kind of go over quickly. The difference between A-roll and B-roll. You may have heard the term B-roll quite a bit, but you may not have heard of A-roll. A-roll is your primary story, your primary footage to help tell the story, right? So your interviews, you got your news segments and your dialogue that helps tell the story. And then you also got your B-roll, which is the supplemental footage to help spice things up a little bit, right? You got your graphics, pictures of buildings and surroundings, cutaway shots, all that fun stuff. And you want to boil those down into one project to give a more compelling story. So when you're editing, your A-roll may be imperfect, right? You may have somebody doing an interview who sits there and pauses quite a bit, or says, you know, maybe they stumble over their words. So that's what you want to use B-roll for, to help cover up some mistakes that maybe you want to cut out later. So it's always good to have A-roll and B-roll as much as possible. Next slide. So this is kind of just a little bit of example of assembly. The first cut that you're going to be making is called a rough cut, or the A-roll cut, basically. You're going to be laying down the foundation for your project based on your story, right? It may not be pretty, but it helps to tell A to B. Next. So this is the next part of the editing process, which will actually be multiple times. And what I say by that, or what I mean by that, is that you have, you'll probably have multiple edits to help boil down your story more and more, right? So your first take, your first take is your story. The next take next take, you're going to be adding in B-roll, graphics, maybe some narration to help kind of fine-tune things a little bit. And then the next slide, you're going to be doing the really fine-tuned editing, right? This is where you want to kind of help to finalize your project. So you'll be doing, voiceover, music. You want to change your audio levels, maybe tweak your video a little bit for color and clarity. Things like that to help make your project a little bit more stunning, right? Next slide. With more fine tuning as far as editing goes, you want to add transitions, filters, and graphics. These are, again, the spice of the project. You may not use graphics all the time, but you probably will be using filters and transitions a little bit more. And again, with transitions, use what's appropriate. All right, next. And so these are just kind of a couple things to think about for when you're doing fine tuning. Does the color and brightness look correct in my video? Are my audio levels loud enough for people to hear, but not loud enough for distortion? Does the music overpower the dialogue? Oftentimes we've had people put music in that's too loud and you can't hear what people are saying. So we've had to go back and fine tune that a little bit more. And then just a couple other ones. Overall, does the story make sense? If you tell a story and it doesn't make sense, you're going to cause a lot more questions than you need. So next, for exporting, you're going to want to use a version that is fairly widely available for like YouTube, Vimeo, other platforms, and the most widely accepted one that I've come across is MP4. Usually it's pretty well known, so you're going to be pretty good if you export with MP4. All right, next, and so these are just a couple notes where video production can be challenging and it may look scary, but it can also be fun and rewarding. And then next, if you get lost or stuck, there are tons of tutorials out there available to help guide you along your path and get you to where you need to go. And there we go.
Thank you, Corbin.
Yep.
So we have a couple questions coming in. We have, what program do you use to make video files smaller? So what kinds of compression tools are out there that you can suggest to folks?
So in my experience, the one that we use a lot of is Adobe Media Encoder, which gives you a lot of different profiles that you can use to help make your program smaller, your file size smaller. It does cost if you want more functionality, but I think they do have a free version available. It's a little bit older, but it still works just as well. So if you look for Adobe Media Encoder, that works. One that I have also got on my computer is the Apple Compressor, which is a $50 app. That one is Apple only, so you won't be able to use it on PC, whereas with Premiere, you can use it between both PC and Mac. So this is a couple good options.
There's also for free, there's also Handbrake and MPEG Streamclip as well. But the newer version of MPEG Streamclip doesn't work with the new OS of Mac. So just if you have a new Mac, you can't use that one.
Yeah.
So now we just want to open it up to questions. I know we've given you a lot of information, and believe me, we had to whittle down even what we would have liked to have done, because our goal would be to have all of you leaving this session and go out and shoot before it gets dark, because this time of day, if it weren't so gray, although gray is not a bad cover for shooting outside, it actually can be one of the better lighting conditions outside. I will just mention a couple things while you're thinking of questions. You can either put them in the chat, or you could just take your mute off and then jump in and ask us. But one of the things that I have done just super DIY, when I was making my one of my documentaries in Cuba, I couldn't bring lighting into the country because I didn't have a journalist visa. And so we had camping headlights that we attached to our heads and had a light, so camping lights that you just put on your head. And we used 2 of them to create 2-point lighting. And then there was a light behind the person that created 3-point lighting, which we didn't go into because it's a little more advanced, but having more than one lighting source is really helpful. Sometimes you can get a little light on the back of someone's head, not so that their face isn't lit, but having something as simple as the light on your phone. Actually, I don't know if any of you saw that I was sort of playing with that while Corbin was talking. You can use the flashlight tool on your phone if you don't have any other light, just to get some light on people's face, because it can be hard sometimes to get the right lighting. I mean, we're all experimenting with Zoom, right? I saw Kevin there moving around while we were talking, but you can see that the lighting, even in my house here, this would be the best lighting really, but because of the window behind me, it didn't work very well. But you can see how much better it is than even the coolness of this lighting over here. So you can also see that warmth and the coolness really changes. It can change the mood too of the story, right? Like he was saying, the ghoulish aspect of lighting. The audio can change the mood. The video can change the mood. The lighting can really change the mood. So I think you could think about different things you might do to create a certain feeling in your story, because that's really what we're going for, as I was mentioning, is what is the feeling that people are going to leave when they've watched the story, like we saw in the case of the Google reunion story? What is the feeling that they're going to have about you, about your business, about your product, about your services? What other services does BIG offer to small businesses in Brookline other than classes? Anne, do you want to talk about the guidelines for posting your business right now? I can show the Refrulo clip if you want, but you could talk about where to find that information.
Yeah, if you go to brooklineinteractive.org/COVID-19, there's a section there that says like how to get your business posted on BIG's channel. So it's just a really simple slate, and you can just give me the information and I can just create one, or you can make your own slate. So that's one thing that we're doing currently. We also, in like non-COVID times, we also do video production services as well. Okay, so Kathy's presenting an example here. So this is what we have, we call our cable electronic bulletin board. So on our cable channels, we have what are called interstitials that play in between all of our content. And so usually there's just some audio, some music or something, and then we have different informational slides or little video clips or little like slideshows that show in between these. So we can play those for you. And as Kathy said, normally we don't do sort of commercial stuff because we are a non-commercial community cable channel, but we are doing that now because we definitely want to help support the community. And as I was saying, we do have production services as well. So besides the classes, you know, we can help you plan out projects that you want to do. We can help you shoot them. We can do one-on-ones as well. If you don't want to sit in a class, we can also schedule time one-on-one with myself or with Corbin or Kathy. What other services to businesses can you think of that we could do?
Well, I think one of the things that we've done before is we've hosted events at BIG. When we're in non-COVID times, we have a wonderful facility and we're able to host events. We've hosted events with the Chamber. We've hosted marketing your business seminars at BIG in collaboration with the Chamber. We also do, right now during COVID times, we are hosting the Small Business Committee of the Town of Brookline every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Andrew from BIG and I are there with Raul Fernandez. Debbie is there as well, and other committee members of the town's Small Business Committee, Kara Bruton from the Redevelopment Agency, Economic Development Agency. So there's a lot of things that I think we want to do to be able to support your needs as local businesses. I mean, really the best thing that you can use this for is we distribute our cable channels to 19,000 local cable subscribers, which most towns have a much lower percentage of cable penetration. So we're very lucky in Brookline that we have that level of customers and viewers on cable. We also do have, as you can imagine right now, given that we've had 100 live meetings and community events, there's a lot of people watching our cable channels now, and there's a lot of people watching us online. So brooklineinteractive.org/live, folks are watching. We can see how many people are watching, something we don't get normally from the cable companies. They don't tell us how many people are watching, which has made it difficult for us to advertise, frankly, but we do know people are watching. We get calls anytime a meeting or program has a problem with audio. Corbin and Andrew and I get a call and fix any problems, but we do see a lot more people right now watching over social media, which is a great time to be telling your stories, in fact, online, as people are spending more time at home, and all their time at home and time on social media.
Yeah, and also I just want to mention as well, during non-COVID times, we do equipment rentals as well. So some of the equipment, if you want to use DSLR cameras, lighting equipment, things like that, we have that available for rental as well. And also you can just, you don't have to do even like a commercial type story. You could just do, like I just met this morning with somebody who wants to do a bread making show, and they're going to do it over Zoom. And they're going to use that to promote online classes. So there's no direct sales. Like you can't say, go buy this thing, it costs $8 or $10, but you can talk about how you know information and share information to let people know that you're an expert in some area. So that's another way to use our resources without sort of, totally breaking our cable rules about being non-commercial.
I really want to do a show on What Can I Eat This is going to be the name of the show, because I almost every day go and look at something in my fridge and wonder, can I eat that? Can I drink this milk? I don't know. And I think it'd be really funny, right? So, what are things like that you could do? A half an hour show. I mean, Tommy Vitolo, he's a great example actually, because I've been trying to get him to do a show for the last 2 years, and he's too busy. And he's been now doing a show for 7 weeks. I think it's his 7th week, 6th or 7th week. And, he's been having people on the show, different topics, doing state updates. And in a way, it's something he wants to do because he wants the community to be informed, but he's also, promoting his own brand, right? I mean, politicians are really good at that. Learn from them, right? They're good at sharing themselves and what's going on in their world because that's their job, but it's also a branding thing. And I thought it was so great that he also wanted to do a cooking show. Because it's something people are interested in right now. So that's what I meant about, find these things like baking bread, procrastinating, whatever it is that you're seeing from day to day that you can figure out a way to tie into your show. Sheldon, I'm thinking about Lars Anderson. I know you're from Lars Anderson, the Auto Museum. I'm thinking, we're not driving right now. So maybe it's a good time to talk about cars and the history of cars and how, how did that whole process happen? History right now is, people are very interested in history. We have Ken Liss from the Historical Society in Brookline doing shows for us. All he's doing, it's very, very easy. He is recording his own screen. He's doing a screen recording of just photographs that he's found and collected from different sources, showing us on his screen and doing a voiceover. And he wrote a script for it, kind of Ken Burns style. And it's fascinating content. I was watching it Friday night, a couple of weeks ago. We had it on a Friday night. So, anything can be a show. Jen asked the question, I want to make sure we answer this because we have run over by a few minutes. Can you book consulting time to help set up our systems? Right now, we don't have a lot of time to do consulting. During normal times, we do some small business consulting work around storytelling and communications and paid production work, as Anne mentioned. We might be able to help as the weeks go by. Right now, our 4-person team is so booked. I can't imagine us doing this, but keep checking back with us because things may change. In terms of content, as Ann mentioned, the stories that you can tell us about your business are the best kinds of content to get to us, because things that aren't over promoting are better right now. People don't want in your face kind of marketing, like buy my product. They want to hear a story about vulnerability or emotion or connection. Those are the kinds of stories we want too, but they're also going to benefit your bottom line and your value proposition to others in the community. And then I see a question about social media platforms. What provides the most valuable marketing platform for promoting small businesses, for example, a restaurant? Not really the purview of this particular conversation. I mean, I think a social marketing, a webinar might be better for that. But I will say, just from my own experience, different demographics have different platforms that they most typically use, right? So if you look at some of the data around Facebook, for example, my parents' generation are on Facebook all the time. They don't even text me anymore. They just message me on Facebook. It drives me crazy. As a Gen Xer, I'm not on Facebook that much. Young people are on TikTok, right? That's where high school kids are. And down to 10 years old, that's where the youngest demographics are. Twitter's kind of a free for all. And Instagram, I would say, started out younger. Now you're seeing that age go up a little bit. But different platforms, as I was mentioning, different platforms are really good for reaching different demographics and psychographics. It depends on who you want to reach. And I think they're probably the Chamber has had or will have something on kind of social media and how to maximize that based on what your goals are around those platforms.
Which brings me to thank you so much. You all really gave us the tools, not only for creating a story, but for putting it out there and producing it and giving us just enough information to be curious enough to want to learn more. And I want to reiterate what Kathy said too about the importance of big right now, in that in non-COVID times, big is an integral part of our community. But since this all began about a month ago, as Kathy said, they've been really important in terms of being able to bring all of our meetings that are usually in person online, so that we can still participate, we can still have a cohesive community. And so it's been really, really important. So, once again, thank you for taking time out today to be with us and to help all of our businesses here. And thanks for all you're doing when you're not here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I want to thank Ann and Corbin for doing all the work to put this together, and Debbie and Clara as well. Thanks for your help in getting this out to as many people as possible. I hope we can do it again, and we will air this on the cable channels and online. So if you missed something or want to watch it again or share it with others, please do so.
And I'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone who registered that will include the PowerPoint and the link to the amazing document that they made, the spreadsheet, the worksheet, as well as the Brookline Interactive COVID page.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.